They say the dead feel nothing, but if that were true, then why did the wind seem to tremble when she spoke? The head of Cyrus the Great, once the most feared man alive, floated in a swollen wineskin filled to the brim with blood. The liquid was thick, dark, and warm, carrying the metallic tang of death. Around him lay the still forms of his once invincible army, their armor split open like crushed beetles, their eyes glassy under the endless, pitiless sky of the steppe. And there she stood, Queen Tomyris of the Massage-Te, her hair unbound and wild as the wind that whipped across the plains, her hands steady as stone. She was not just a ruler now, she was a verdict. She was the embodiment of a promise kept. "Drink your fill," she whispered to the severed head, her voice neither trembling nor triumphant, but heavy with the gravity of an oath fulfilled. "You thirsted for blood, Cyrus. Now you have it, enough to drown you for all eternity." The scene was not born from sudden rage, nor from the chaos of battle. This was a ritual, a sentence carried out with the precision of one who knew the cost and accepted it without hesitation. She had sworn to the sun, the god her people called upon before riding into war, that she would give this man his fill of blood. And on the steppes, oaths to the sun were not poetry, they were law. What could drive a queen to desecrate the greatest conqueror the world had ever known? What could transform a commander into an executioner and a mother into something even more dangerous? To answer that, we must go back to when the empire of Cyrus stretched like an unbroken shadow from the Mediterranean to the mountains of the Hindu Kush, back to when he believed there was no enemy left who could stop him, back to the day he turned his gaze toward the wild lands beyond the Jaxartes River and met a woman who would become his undoing. Part 1. King of Kings. For 30 years, Cyrus the Great had been the architect of an empire that swallowed nations whole. From the glittering palaces of Lydia, where gold spilled from the treasuries like rivers, to the temples of Babylon, where priests bent their knees to a new master, his name was a tide that rose and drowned kingdoms, leaving behind only tribute and obedience. He was not just a warrior, he was a weaver of power, a strategist whose maps were drawn not only in ink and blood, but in promises and debts, a politician who could turn enemies into governors and conquerors into loyal vassals. When a city opened its gates, he spared its people, restored their gods, and let them keep their customs, but always under his shadow. When a king surrendered, Cyrus did not humiliate him. He absorbed him, folding his throne into the great tapestry of Persia. It was this mixture of iron and silk, conquest and calculated benevolence that made the Persian Empire the largest the world had ever seen. From the warm, salt blue waters of the Mediterranean to the frozen white edges of the Hindu Kush, it stretched like a golden net over half the known earth. Merchants moved along its royal roads without fear. Caravans crossed deserts under banners that guaranteed safe passage. Armies marched beneath the royal standard, its embroidered lion seeming to watch over the world itself. And at the center of it all stood Cyrus, the King of Kings, his crown heavy not with jewels, but with victories. Yet power is a hunger that no feast can sate. Beyond the empire's northern frontier lay a land untouched by the Persian standard, a place with no cities, no palaces, no stone roads, only an ocean of grass that rolled to the horizon, where the wind was the only music and survival was the only law. They were called the Massagetæ, nomads whose women fought beside men, whose laws were written in blood, whose god was war itself. They drank the blood of their enemies, mixed with mare's milk, not in savagery, but in ritual, a covenant with the life they had taken. Cyrus had faced armies before. He had broken kings, rebels, and empires that boasted walls so high the sun itself seemed to bow to them. But never this, never a people who could vanish into the horizon, strike like lightning, and fade into the wind before an army could turn to face them. Still, he believed there was no war he could not win, no ruler he could not bend. And so, instead of sending his armies at once, he sent words first, words wrapped in silk and gold, heavy with the weight of royal intention, an offer of marriage, not love, not alliance, conquest dressed in the robes of diplomacy. The woman who received that proposal would answer not with honeyed phrases, but with the sharp edge of defiance, an answer that would set Cyrus on the road to his first and only defeat. Part 2. Queen of the Steppe. She was born into a world with no walls, no marble palaces to inherit, no stone towers to protect her from the wind. Only the steppe, an endless ocean of grass, where the horizon was both boundary and promise, and the sky was the only ceiling worth claiming. Here, life was a long war. The winters could flay a man's flesh as cruelly as any enemy's blade. The summers burned the earth until the grass crumbled under hoof. Predators came in many shapes, some with claws, some with spears. Survival was not a right. It was a prize fought for every single day. Tomyris of the Massagetæ was not raised to curtsy before kings. She learned to ride before she could walk, her tiny hands clutching the coarse mane of a steppe pony. By the time she could braid her own hair, she could loose an arrow at full gallop and split a target's heart. In her people's eyes, a leader who could not fight was no leader at all. Authority was not given by bloodline, but forged in battle and tempered in the fire of survival. Among the Massagetæ, women stood shoulder to shoulder with men in war. A queen could command an army, claim the spoils, and take the heads of her enemies as trophies. To drink the blood of a fallen foe mixed with mare's milk was not savagery, it was sacrament. It bound the living to the dead and honored the god of war who watched over the endless plains. Tomyris rose to power not by chance, but through a string of victories that made her name a weapon in itself. It was said that her gaze could strip the courage from a man in the heartbeat it took for her hand to close around the hilt of her sword. To her people, she was both shield and spear, the protector of their way of life, and the blade that would strike first when danger approached. When the proposal came from Cyrus, it carried the weight of gold and the stench of conquest. The words promised union, but the meaning was a collar in disguise: submit and be absorbed. She read the offer once, then she tore it in two, the silk ribbons snapping like dry twigs. Her answer rode with the wind across the grasslands, carried by messengers whose horses never slowed. Cross my border, and you will find nothing but death waiting for you. For Cyrus, the rejection was more than a refusal. It was a wound to his pride. Kings and emperors had knelt before him, their crowns laid humbly at his feet. But this barbarian queen had spat in the face of the King of Kings. He would not simply defeat her, he would crush her. He would make her name vanish like smoke over the grasslands, leaving no trace but ash. What he did not know, what no Persian general could have guessed, was that Tomyris had already begun to weave a trap, and the bait would be blood. Part 3. The Trap of Wine and Blood. The Persians came like a tide, a wall of iron and flesh rolling across the land, shields flashing under the unblinking sun, spears rising and falling in perfect rhythm. Each step was measured, inevitable, as though the earth itself could not resist their advance. Cyrus, in his chariot, commanded with the confidence of a man who had never known true defeat. When the Jaxartes River blocked their path, he did not hesitate. He ordered a bridge to be built, timbers dragged from far-off lands, lashed together by hands hardened from war. By dawn, the Persians had spanned the wild, cold waters with a structure so precise it seemed to mock the untamed steppe. Scouts returned with news that the Massagetæ were falling back, retreating deeper into their own territory. To Cyrus, this was the oldest story in the book, barbarians crumbling before the discipline of civilization. To Tomyris, it was the opening act of her hunt. She gave her orders in a voice like tempered steel. A small, expendable detachment would meet the Persians head-on, clash briefly, then shatter. A convincing imitation of panic and defeat. Behind them, they left a camp. Tents sagged in the wind like exhausted beasts. Fires still smoldered. There were stores of meat and bread. And there, most tempting of all, stood casks of wine. Wine was rare on the steppe. The Massagetæ drank sparingly, for drunkenness dulled the hand and clouded the eye. But the Persians drank as only men who believed themselves untouchable could. When the Massagetæ detachment scattered, the Persians fell upon the camp. They found no hidden soldiers, no traps, only the spoils of an easy victory. The first cups were poured with laughter, the second with songs. By the third, the discipline of the Persian army dissolved into the warmth of intoxication. Wine ran like rivers into their bellies, and the songs rose into the night like banners unfurled in triumph. Somewhere in that haze, the jaws of the trap closed, for among those captured in the mock battle was Spargapises, the son of Tomyris, commander of a Massagetæ detachment and the living pulse of her heart. Cyrus had him bound in chains, the young man's life now dangling as a bargaining chip. When word reached Tomyris, she did not weep. She sent a message, short, almost courteous, poison wrapped in civility. "Return, my son, and I will grant you safe passage from my lands. Refuse, and I swear by the sun, Lord of the Massagetæ, you will drink your fill of blood." Cyrus laughed. In the world of kings, such threats were bluster, not prophecy. He kept the prince imagining the queen would yield rather than watch her heir perish. But Spargapises knew his mother, knew that yielding was a kind of death worse than the grave. He asked for his bonds to be loosened. They granted it, thinking him broken. And then, in one swift, decisive act, he took his own life before the sun could rise. At dawn, the camp was quiet. The wine casks lay overturned, their contents soaking into the dirt. The laughter of the night was gone, replaced by the uneasy stillness of a land holding its breath. And then the wind shifted, bringing with it the low thunder of hooves, the metallic scent of blood, and the wrath of a mother who had nothing left to lose. Part 4. The day the steppe turned red. They came at dawn, not in neat ranks, not to the beat of drums, but as a storm comes, sudden, everywhere at once, without warning, without mercy. From the east, the sun rose swollen and blood-red, as if it already knew what it would drink before the day was done. The horizon trembled, not with a heat of morning, but with the flicker of movement. At first, it was only a shimmer. Then it became a tide of shapes, thousands of mounted warriors cresting the hills, their hooves pounding the steppe until the earth itself seemed to shudder. It was not marching, it was flowing, like water, like fire, like a living thing. The Masajte did not advance in lines. They swarmed, a rolling sea of horsemen, each rider already knocking an arrow before the Persians could even lift their shields. The first volley came like rain from a black sky, hissing through the air like serpents, finding the gaps in bronze and leather. Men collapsed without ever seeing their killers. Cyrus shouted orders, his voice straining to cut through the chaos. The heavy infantry, unbreakable in every battle before, now stood like islands in a drowning sea, too slow to strike, too rigid to chase an enemy that dissolved before their eyes. The Masajte struck, vanished, then struck again. From the left, from the right, from behind, no front, no flank, no safe ground. Persian cavalry tried to give chase, but the steppe ponies ran longer, faster, turning and firing arrows in full gallop as if the laws of war no longer applied. The sky filled with the whistle of death, and the ground drank deeply. Cyrus fought in the thick of it. The King of Kings was no coward. He rode into the heart of the melee, his sword a silver flash, his armor hammered and scarred with every blow deflected. But courage could not stop the tide. Every advance was met with disappearance. Every gap closed was met with a new wound somewhere else. Some say an arrow found his throat, the shaft quivering as he fell from the saddle. Others whisper that he was pulled from his horse, swallowed by the crush of bodies, and cut down in a frenzy of steel. What all agree on is this: when the sun reached its peak, the Persian army was gone. The battlefield fell into a silence so vast it was almost holy, broken only by the low, ceaseless drone of flies and the slow cooling of thousands of corpses. The banners of Persia lay face down in the dirt, their lions trampled beyond recognition, and somewhere among the fallen lay the body of Cyrus the Great, king, conqueror, and now nothing more than a man brought low by the very people he had once dismissed as barbarians. But for Tomyris, this was not the end. Death in battle was mercy, and she had promised him no mercy. Part 5. The Oath Fulfilled. The search took hours. Under the pitiless burning sun, her warriors moved like shadows through the wreckage of war, turning over bodies stiff with death, cutting away armor fused to flesh, lifting the fallen from tangled heaps of men and horses. The air was thick with the stench of iron and rot. Flies swarmed so densely they looked like black smoke drifting over the field. The wind carried the low, constant murmur of death, a mingling of buzzing wings and the soft collapse of armor as bodies cooled. At last, they found him. The man who had been called the King of Kings lay sprawled in the dirt, his lifeless eyes staring into a sky that would never close for him again. His armor was dented, the gold dulled by blood and dust. His beard was matted, stiff with the crimson of his own veins. To most, he was a corpse, just another among thousands. To Tamiris, he was a debt waiting to be paid. Her voice was quiet when she gave the order. "Strip him!" The body was laid bare to the sun. A wineskin was brought forward, thick, heavy, stitched from the hide of an ox. Its mouth gaped like the maw of something ancient and hungry. Her warriors moved without hesitation. They slit the throats of the surviving Persian captives, and those too wounded to flee or fight. The blood poured in steaming rivers into the wineskin, filling it slowly, gurgling as if the skin itself were alive and drinking. When it was done, the air reeked of copper and heat. The skin sagged with the weight of life stolen and transformed into vengeance. Then they brought her the head. Cyrus's face was pale, his lips parted, as if still trying to shape commands to an army that could no longer hear. His eyes, once sharp enough to size up kings and kingdoms, were now glass, catching nothing but the cold light of the sun. Tamiris took it in both hands. Her grip was steady, her gaze fixed on the man who had taken her son from her. She did not speak to her warriors. She spoke to him, as if he could still hear her in the space between this world and the next. "I told you, Cyrus, I would give you your fill of blood. You thirsted for it in life. Now drink it in death." With no hesitation, she forced his head into the wineskin. The blood surged up around his face, swallowing him whole. Red seeped into his hair, his beard, his open eyes, until he was nothing more than a shadow beneath the surface. It was not rage that moved her hands. It was the cold precision of a promise kept, an oath sworn before the sun and on the steppe. Such oaths were eternal. Breaking them was worse than death. When it was over, she stood for a moment apart from her warriors. The wind tore at her hair. The horizon was wide, empty, endless. She had taken her vengeance. She had honored her son, and in doing so, she had carved her name into the stone of history. Not merely as a queen, not merely as a warrior, but as a force no empire could tame. For centuries after, no Persian army would dare cross the Jaxartes again. The grass grew tall and wild over the bones of Cyrus's men, and the story traveled far of the queen who fed an emperor his own thirst.